good evening, and welcome Journal Club members and guests. Today we have a grave topic ahead of us, but that is quite critical because this month we mark the Suicide Awareness Month. Every September, this is an annual commemoration. Today we have an expert in the same. This topic will be facilitated by Mary Gitau, who has a master's in psychology as well as an ongoing master's in suicidology. I'm going to share the link to her center, which is all about all matters suicide, including research on suicide. So before I invite our facilitator today, our guest speaker, I'd like each one of us to introduce ourselves in the chat. Please tell us your name, institution, research interest, and your expectations. And of course, you can also add your country. I am aware we have audiences from near and far. And in case you're not talking, please also mute yourself. We will be availing this webinar as usual on our YouTube channel. So if you have not yet subscribed to the AIDA Africa Journal Club YouTube channel, please do so. The channel is called simply AIDA Africa. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Journal Club, and then I will invite our guest speaker. So Journal Club is a space that exists for any and all researchers, from early career researchers all the way to researchers who are at the point of retirement, really. And we exist in our different disciplines, and we also exist in our interdisciplinary conversations on all matters research. In this space, you can come up with a topic, just like Mary Gitau has honored us with today, and you can present amongst your peers, either on a topic that is squarely within research or inside of your field. You can also come up with a topic that is just in your subject area, and we assist you with the space to also grow as a researcher. So that is what we are about. And we also have WhatsApp platforms, and we have daily conversations on research. And you're really welcome, especially those of you who are joining us for the first time. So I can see some introductions already coming in the chat. Dr. Elizabeth Akinyi Owino from Moi University, Kenya, welcome. Nkatha Doreen Bae, University of Nairobi, / Kenyatta National Hospital, Kenya. We have Tom Mboya Nyangwara, Master of Medicine student, University of Nairobi. Research interest areas are mental health and chronic diseases. I'm sure this is squarely within what we are talking about today. I've just received news of Senate passing the mental health amendment bill. So those of us in mental health are quite in a celebratory mood today, as we are now recounting the next steps into actually actioning and implementing these laws that the legislators have put forth. And I'll be happy to know how, if there's been any change in the law on suicide. I mean, have the legislators said anything about it? If any of you watched the 4 p.m. news, you could please update us in the chat. And Tom Nyangwara adds that he has a Master of Medicine in Psychiatry. Welcome. Mureithi, please mute yourself kindly. So Mureithi Njage from Meru University, welcome. Keep introducing yourselves in the chat. And at this time, I would like to hand over the session to Mary Gitau. Meanwhile, please write your questions and comments in the chat. We will have an interactive Q&A discussion at the end. So Mary, you're very welcome to present on suicide.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Wangare. I'm so delighted to be here this evening. It's an honor to actually, be part of this group, because I think when I'm on WhatsApp, I have grown, from the conversation that happened about research and all that. So it's really interesting to know that, within our network, there are people that, that really want others to grow in the area of research, that even if we we're growing in various fields, and you even attending classes for that specific, but at least when it comes to research, at least I know where who to contact and the guidance and all that. So I'm so happy to be here. As Wangari has said, I hold an MA in counseling psychology and an ongoing MA in suicidology. My career interests include research in risk and protective factors which are associated with suicide and self-harm. And of course, effectiveness of suicide prevention and self-harm and intervention. I run an organization called Center for Suicide Research and Intervention, where it matters suicide. It's something that is very dear to my heart. And, I just long for that day that, we will wake up and we have, we get to a place of attaining zero suicides in our generations, be it in Kenya or Africa and the world. So today I'm going to speak about a topic that is so dear to my heart, and it is on suicide. So I will share my slides. When I'm doing my presentation, I'll be off video just for the purpose of, just checking the internet and all that. At times we don't have so stable internet. So I'll allow me to be off video, but of course I'll put on my video at the end after my presentation. So I will share my screen. Where is that? Sorry, what did I do?
Okay, take your time.
I'm just trying to share. Oh yeah, here, share my screen. Yeah. So treating chronic suicide ideation. And what is chronic suicide ideation? That's where I'll start. So chronic or passive suicide ideation is like living in the ocean, remarkably enjoying the beautiful waters at the same time stormy, and you don't know you'll survive. And all of us, in one way or another, have been affected by suicide, either by taking care of somebody who's, who is in a suicidal crisis, or maybe we've had suicide thoughts, or we know somebody who's attempted suicide. All has been believed by suicide. So it's actually a very good topic for us to keep having the conversation. However, what is chronic suicide ideation? These are, those moments where, you keep thinking about suicide, today you're okay, tomorrow you're not okay, and all that. So here is the definition. So one of our scholars in psychology, Sigmund Freud, called suicide murder turned 180 degrees, or a very poor response to a very bad day, or again, he said it's self-murder or self-killing, or a deliberate act or intentional act of taking one's own life, or it is an attempt to communicate and solve a problem. Edwin, however, said that it is unresolved psychic or alienation, and that unresolved psychic is that extreme psychological pain that somebody gets to, and the only way out you figure out, it's dying by suicide. So when people get to this place of, having suicidal thoughts or thinking about suicide, or even unfortunately attempting or even dying by suicide, it's only the person who's been affected that can actually tell us what's happening to them. However, what we know, that this person has probably in their own world explored different ways of trying to survive, and they figure out that the only way to do it is to die by suicide. So why the rise of suicide in our generation, or currently where we are? What's really happening with us? So increasing number of suicide clearly indicates something is wrong somewhere in the social system, our society. When you look at where we are, like, in the last 3 months, that's April, May, and June, some numbers were quite alarming. Of course, some of us feel that there was underreporting, and they said almost 500 persons, to be specific, they mentioned 483 persons had been identified or had died of suicide. That's according to the police data. So why are we having so many suicide cases now, yet it is the time that we're actually talking about suicide more, or about mental health, or, like there's so many platforms that are discussing about wellness and all that. What's really happening? And some of the research indicates that it's about our society, our social system. Where are we currently? When we think about it politically or even socially, we are not doing well. Religiously, again, we are not doing well. Probably we're thinking that our expectations would be met if we are in the religion circle, but that is not happening. Politically, there's so much expectation. However, that doesn't come through. Economically, so many people among us have lost jobs, probably our salaries have been cut. And so there's so much that is happening around us. So it's not a personal situation, but rather a manifestation of a social condition. What's happening, as I have said, what's happening around us? And even as we have this conversation, even as we think about it, what is it that we are doing that is not right? Suicidal currents are the collective tendencies that dominate some vulnerable persons. The act of suicide is nothing but a manifestation of these currents. Of course, the pandemic again has not made it easy. There's lack of connections. There's lack of gathering. People no longer get to meet or visit their friends. We are always in fear. Even those people that we trusted so much, nowadays your friend calls you and you're thinking, I really want to see you, but I can't see you because I'm scared of COVID. There's so much that is happening. And what has, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic and lack of connections, no gathering, and us being on our own, there's that moment of reflection of own lives. Probably people get to a place of sitting down and kind of reflecting on where they're coming from. Where am I? Who am I as a person? Am I good enough? Probably there's no that affirmation, self-esteem has been interfered with. So there's so much that is happening in the lives of people that we are actually having more rise in suicide, even at this particular time that we're having so much conversation happening, so much community happening. However, we may want to ask the question, are we doing downstream or upstream work? We'll get to that as we go on. So suicidal behaviors, allow me to define a few. So suicide, a self-injurious act intended to end one's life, which results in death. Self-inflicted or intentional injury. So that's the definition of suicide, according to many scholars and those people who've been there before us. That place where, when you're thinking about suicide, so there's that self-injure with an intention to end one's life. What is attempted suicide? Attempted suicide is a potential, self-injurious act, which you intend to end your own life, but rather it doesn't result in death. You, by good luck or whatever we want to call it, you survive. So that's an attempted suicide. Suicide ideation. So when you get to that place of, engaging in a suicide behavior with or without a specific plan, the thoughts, one person thinking of, maybe I don't need to be in this place. Maybe if I did 1, 2, 3, life would be better. Maybe, those are the thoughts that come to somebody's life where you're like, no, and you start engaging even in things that could actually harm you or lead you to death. So that's what we call suicide ideation. So categories of suicide: impulsive suicide and planned suicide. So in impulsive suicide, there appears to be state of crisis. No, not. So suicide is just, at times, it's not just a one-time event, but rather an event that, there's a series of events that have happened. In most cases, it's because of probably where you're coming from. Remember, I said about reflection of own life. Probably the way you've grown, there's so much trauma that you've gone through as a person. And so, and maybe you've never dealt with that. And so it gets to a place where other things in life kind of come through and your needs get frustrated, and so you're like, maybe I'm not even worth it anymore. So that state of crisis at that particular time. Then of course there's that spontaneous thought as a response to crisis or trauma, as I've indicated. Then of course there's loss of capacity to rationally control emotions, thoughts, or behavior because of where you're coming from, how you've been taught, or how things have happened in your life. Again, perceptions that they have of trauma or meaning or a significance. Like when you give a significance meaning to something, if something happens today, like even politically, or even like, for example, a football, some of us are fans of football, maybe you're watching a certain club play, and then maybe they lose, or they don't perform as you expected. The meaning that you attach to that game or to that club can actually lead one to harming themselves or suicide. So that impulsivity, planned suicide, where it's not in a state of crisis at the moment, just a mild state of crisis. So there's, probably somebody has been in a place of things have not been working out. And over again, when you think about chronic suicide ideation, one has been thinking about suicide. And probably they've even attempted it. And probably they've even said, when I get to this age, I'm going to harm myself, or when I do 1, 2, 3 things, I'll harm myself. So at that particular time, you may not be in a state of crisis or a mild state, but just something could trigger you and could lead to suicide. Somebody who is in a planned suicide, or who's been planning about suicide, could have, or behavior could appear calm. So, and that's why at times we miss the warning signs of, and when somebody dies by suicide, we ask the question, we didn't think that this person would die by suicide. Everything about them was calm. They were good people. They had everything figured out. They had good job and all that. So yeah, so behavior appear calm. Then the person seemed to be focused and thought processes are rational. However, deep down within themselves, something is happening, or something is building up. They're determined to solve the problem regardless. Remember, we said suicide is about solving a problem. So you want to get to a place of wanting to solve a particular problem. So there's that determination. I want to get to a place of solving a problem. So, and for you, solving that problem includes even dying by suicide. So, and suicide is about will to live and will to die. So we want to focus on even when you're treating suicide, or when you're doing intervention and management, we want to focus on the will to die. We want to validate, and allow this person, okay, so this is the place you are in. How can we be able to do it different? So yeah, so that determination to solve a problem could lead somebody to suicide. So suicidal thoughts or ideations, active. So we have active thoughts and passive thoughts. Active, that's the desire and the urge, and plan to die by suicide right now. I want to kill myself now. I want to end my life now. That's the activeness. And at times when we receive these phone calls, and many of us here are counselors, somebody comes and says, I want to die now. I want to kill myself now. I want to end it now. So that those are the active, the active thoughts of suicide. You're already thinking, you probably even have a plan. Now, the passive, on the other end, it's a desire and an urge of wanting to end it all. And this is where probably things are not working out. Your needs have been frustrated and not met. And you hear somebody probably saying, I'll be better off dead. I just wish I could sleep and never wake up. I wish I could be walking on that road and get hit by the car. When it is raining and they say, I just wish, I could be struck down by lightning. So that's passive. You don't even have a plan. There's no plan that is happening, but there are those thoughts in mind of somebody wanting to die. And we have these clients who come to us that, they've been squeezed to an end, and they're thinking, I just wish I could end it all. So when we better intervene at this place of passiveness, then the thoughts and the ideation will not get to a place of activeness, and then we'll have saved the life of this person. So research that was done by Public Medic 2008 indicated regarding the lifetime history of suicidality of ever making a plan is approximately 33%, and the probability of making an attempt is approximately 30%. So there's making the plan and making an attempt. So those who make a plan, you know, are 33%. There's a probability of 33%. But those who get to do the attempt are slightly less than 30%. High chances are that there was an intervention that was done. These people were making a plan and they discussed about it with somebody, or somebody intervened when they probably were in their passiveness or even activeness. So the attempt never really got to happen. However, what we know, I think, and the research is still ongoing, and unfortunately, research here in the country is still scanty. That's what we're working on as an organization. But what we know is that for every one person that dies by suicide, okay, let me start with those who are affected. For every one person that dies by suicide, you know, the ripple effect, at least 135 others are affected by suicide. However, for one person that attempts suicide, that dies by suicide, 23 others, WHO, are having thoughts of suicide. And what we know is, after every 40 seconds, somebody dies by suicide. Those are quite alarming numbers, because it means that more people are thinking about suicide, are having thoughts of suicide. And I think when you think about this, I love it that here in the country, we're working so much hard, and thankful to KPA, the Psychiatric Association, with, you know, leading to try and, you know, decriminalize suicide, because we want to be able to help those people to come out and say, this is the struggle I'm having as a person, you know. And when you get to a place of decriminalization of suicide, then it means we'll have so many people coming up and saying, I'm struggling with this, you know, I'm struggling with something like this, and I've been thinking about suicide for so long. So then, and when they communicate, will happen, and people will get to a place of being assisted. So that's a milestone that you're making as an organization, as a country. And then the other thing, of course, we are so happy that the mental health bill has successfully gone through Senate. So that's something to celebrate as mental health professionals. And even this space of decriminalization of suicide will also get there. Individuals with a lifetime of suicide ideation and a plan, the probability of attempting suicide was approximately 55%. Among ideators with a plan, the probability of attempting was only 15%. So see the variation. It just means that those without a plan, you know, those who are having the passive thoughts of suicide, the probability of attempting is 15%. And this basically happens in those countries, especially that, one, have decriminalized suicide, two, they have good mechanism of addressing or helping those people who are in a crisis of suicide, you know, or even those who've been affected by suicide in one way or another. So I look forward to a day this country will get there, that we will have even less people that are ideating about suicide. Consistently across countries, about 60% of the transitions from suicidal ideations to a plan and from a plan to attempt occurred in the first year of onset of suicide ideation. This is quite true. And even here in the country, when we are working with those clients who are in a suicidal crisis, you get to notice that the moment they start having these thoughts of suicide, you know, from passive to active to attempting, it happens within the first year of onset of those thoughts. The moment they start thinking about it, chances are, or 60%, even here in the country, chances are they will die or they'll attempt suicide in the first year of having this. So we need to get to a place where the moment a client comes and says, hey, I am thinking about suicide, or even us as mental health professionals, or even us, all of us, because we have something that we can be able to offer, get to a place of asking, hey, where are you? Are you struggling? Are you having suicidal thoughts? And if you're having suicidal thoughts, when was the onset? How long have you been having them? It would be easy for us to be able to intervene and assist these persons. So again, a continuation of chronic suicide ideation, the chronic part of it, persisting for a long time or recurring. So somebody comes to you as a therapist and says, hey, they never go away. I'm always in this state of wanting to harm myself. I'm always in this state of wanting to end it all. So that's what we call chronic. And every time it keeps getting higher or worse and worse. And what at times we want to do is we want to get to a place of asking the client, hey, at what point or what happens that you get to this place of this chronic? At what time particularly in the day? Is it in the morning? Is it mid-morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it late afternoon? When do these persistent ideations or thoughts of suicide come into effect? Tell me, talk to me about it. So you want to walk them through that journey of finding out when does it happen most. So the trajectory is similar to that of a person with any kind of chronic condition. We know even people who are affected by terminal illness, there are those times that things are bad at certain times, and there are things that things are better at certain times. So there are flare-ups where it is far worse than normal, and then symptoms subside, but only temporarily, then they go up. To others, the symptoms never subside. They live with their symptoms, in this case, suicide thoughts, tragedy every day. So just like I've had there's a medic here. So when even in the medic field, we know like when somebody comes, those who are in terminal illness, they come and say, I am in this pain. You want to ask them, when does the pain happen? Is it early morning or is it later in the afternoon? Is it later in the evening? When does the pain happen? And to engage them and find out when is it worse? How is it, is there surface that the thoughts come? Do you feel any pain? So we want to engage the client and find out where they are, and so that we can try and see how do we treat this chronic suicide ideation or thought. That's basically what it means to have the chronic thought of suicide. So the common diagnosis of chronic suicide ideation: one, we borderline personality, mood disorders, substance use disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. We know like we like somebody who abuses substance or alcohol. We want to ask them, is it, how many bottles do you drink that it gets to this place? What triggers? Is it when you drink in a certain place? Is it like when you drink with certain people? Those small questions actually matters a lot when we're engaging people who are having suicidal thoughts, or even those who've attempted suicide, or even those who've been believed by suicide. We want to engage them where they are and find out, how has it been? Where are you? When does it happen so much? We know like those people who struggle with mood disorders. We want to find out when. What is it? When you eat something? Is it when you see somebody? And it is interesting to learn that those people who struggle with suicide ideation, chronic or even unchronic, they have small triggers. Even food, when they get to eat certain amount of food, they'll tell you, I have actually realized when I sit even in a certain cafeteria, I have thoughts of suicide. I have realized even when I enter a certain room in my house, then these thoughts come. So small things actually is what we need to find out, so that we can help clients who are struggling with suicidal behavior. So other factors to evaluate when you're working with persons who are struggling with chronic suicide thoughts, hopelessness and view of the future, helplessness and sense of control. Are they feeling worthlessness? Where are they? What are the current life stressors, such as conflicts at home or work and coping capacity? What's happening in their lives? That's the current stressors, job, family, school, if it's young people, and what's their coping capacity? History of aggressive behavior directed at others or even at themselves. You want to find out, and I have realized in my journey of treating clients in a suicide crisis where how asking some of these questions can really make a difference to them, because then they realize, okay, I actually never thought that this would be a trigger or a factor to consider. So you want to be very specific, when you're working with clients who are in a crisis of suicide. Again, the other things that we want to evaluate is the psychiatric disorders that could include anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, personality disorders, that's borderline. We want to talk to them about post-traumatic stress disorder. We want to talk to them about psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. We want to talk to them about substance abuse disorder, and of course, unipolar major depression. So we want to engage them in every form of conversation, psychiatric, mental illness, undiagnosed or even diagnosed. You want, when they come to you and you're engaging them in a conversation of suicide, them taking you, of course, evaluating, starting from where we are, either going backwards or forward, but being present. That's very important. So being present with the client as you talk to them and finding out where are they, how are they doing. So clients in a suicidal crisis most likely will never self-refer. And we know here, most likely in Kenya, they'll never come out. One, because they don't know actually if this is something that that's a concern or that needs to be treated, like suicide thoughts or suicide ideation. So they'll never self-refer. In most cases, they'll just, they will wait when it gets worse. In most cases, they will resist treatment, whichever treatment, psychiatric treatment, psychological treatment. Because one, as we've said on part one, they do not know that if actually this kind of being in a suicidal crisis or even thinking of suicide needs to actually be addressed. They do not even think that even getting to that place of desiring to die or even having passive thoughts of suicide, they can tell somebody, like just going to somebody and saying, I have been thinking about what if I was not there, what would happen? That in itself means a lot. And us as practitioners need to get to a place of having a conversation and intervening before it is too late. They'll often use drugs or alcohol as psychological pain medication because they want to numb the pain that they could be feeling at the moment. The trauma or the tension or the stress that they're feeling at that particular moment, they want to numb it. Even if it's bodily pain, they're thinking using drugs, using alcohol or any kind of medication will numb the psychological pain. What this does is at that particular time, but then it doesn't treat so much. So these clients who are in suicidal crisis will more or less oftentimes use drugs, to try and numb what they're feeling. So the other thing to note about clients in a suicidal crisis is that they hide their levels of despair so much. They will want to portray everything is okay, knowingly or even unknowingly, because again, stigma and the taboo. How does it happen? How do I even start saying to a friend or even a colleague, even in the same field, that I wish I was not even here? I wish I was not existing. I wish I could go to bed and sleep. The stigma, the taboo. One, to yourself, it could be perceived or it could be real. If we said, we could get help. If we said, high chances are also that people will go away from us. They will set us apart. They will not be associated with somebody who is thinking of harming themselves. And all will be reported. Somebody could say that's a dangerous person. Please keep off from that person. Even making our children to keep off from that person. So there's always hiding despair or hiding that you're in crisis. And in most cases, they'll go undetected because you're hiding who you are. You're not allowing people to know who you are. So in most cases, they'll go undetected. And once they go undetected, then that means help will not be forthcoming. And of course, if it is undetected, then it is untreated because, how else will you treat somebody who you don't know has a problem? And that is why probably we actually need to get to a place of, what are the warning signs of suicide? Because it could be positive or negative. Somebody who was underperforming all of a sudden kind of starts performing and doing better. Is it time to pause and ask them, hey, lately you become active, or just kind of finding out where they are in their journey of life, because it could also be a warning sign. And so as getting to a place of being able to identify or ask somebody who could be in a crisis of suicide, where are you? Are you thinking about suicide? And I know at times somebody will say, no, I'm actually okay. And what I do personally is just getting to them and saying, I know I actually don't trust you now. And I know at times being in the place you are in, having lost a job and you have no income, can actually make somebody get to a place of thinking about suicide. Just letting them that you actually identify with where we are. In that way, there's a high chances that you'll be able to work with people and to stop so many suicides that happen, because suicide is a crisis that can be prevented. So, ideation of suicide or dangers of chronic suicide ideation. It signals despair, hopelessness, or other painful states. It desensitizes the person and increases capacity for harm, because you are just on your own. You're just on your own. You're just thinking, you're just creating these things within yourself. It can create stress in a relationship with others and impairs functioning for some, because this person who is always thinking about suicide, whether passive or active, and it is not addressed or they don't get help, then what happens is, of course, relationship will be affected, because this person has already moved on. In their world, they're thinking about how they will sleep and never wake up. In their world, they're actually planning to harm themselves. So it will create tension and even impair functioning for other people, because the only thing that occupies their mind is harming themselves or hurting themselves. So and that is why it is important for us as practitioners, all of us, as I say, because we all have something that we can be able to do when it comes to suicide, is can we be able to get to a place of identifying somebody who is in a state of crisis, or who is hopeless, or is feeling pain, or they kind of need to be assisted. So yeah, so and those are the dangers. So treatment of suicide ideation, suicide thoughts. So I'll talk about 3. So evidence-based treatments. 1 is the CT, that's cognitive therapy for suicide patients, which is based on Aaron Beck's cognitive behavioral therapy. So what this does, it's, you work with the clients for between 8 to 12 weekly sessions. Between 8 to 12 weeks, those are like 8 to 12 sessions. Within that time, basically like 3 months. And what you want to do is you want to try and work on the cognitive of the person who is in a suicide crisis, be it somebody who is having thoughts of suicide or has attempted suicide. You want to take them through finding out, hey, how are you doing? Just reprocessing and working on their thoughts and questioning them and helping them to kind of see things different. And then the other one is DBT, that's dialect behavioral therapy, which was developed by Masha in 1993. And this is one of those treatments that's proven to be very effective at reducing suicide attempts and ideation. Then the other one, which is kind of my favorite, is the collaborative assessment and management of suicidality, which was developed by David Jobs. And the pillars of collaborative assessment is empathy, collaboration, honesty, and suicide focus. So they focus on suicide and the crisis that the person is in, and they create kind of a relationship between the practitioner and the client to try and find out where are you, and working together between the client and the practitioner and getting a different solution, identifying what I had said, the drivers of suicide. What is driving you to wanting to harm yourself at this time? What drove you to wanting to harm yourself the first time, or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago? So we want to identify the drivers and work on the drivers and kind of give something totally different to the client. So very key to treatment, or when you're working with clients who are suicidal, one is active listening skills, very key. We want to take time all the time to listen to the person who is in a struggle of suicide. We want to hear them. We want them to talk. It doesn't matter how long they will talk. Just keep talking. Let them keep talking, asking the right question. Let's not avoiding going up and about the mountain, and rather asking the person, hey, where are you? Are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? So yeah, asking the question and the right question. Refer the client or the person in crisis to a professional as soon as possible. Do not, even as you're having the conversation, even as you're listening and you're asking the right question, you want to know that my place is probably as a gatekeeper or somebody who is intervening now, but when it comes to professional help, there's another person that I can refer to. So you want to refer the client immediately to a professional so that they can get the professional help. That doesn't mean that you can't do anything. We can all do something. Then the last thing is taking care of ourselves. It's never easy working with clients who are in a suicide crisis, be it those who've been bereaved, or those who've attempted suicide, or those who are having thoughts, active or passive. It's even draining because we are all human beings. So we want to know how to take care of ourselves and not even working alone. Always getting supervision, going for personal therapy, and just, allowing yourself to, to take breaks in between. So therapist self-care, challenge your expectations of control and care, maintain hope, don't practice in isolation, use consultation or supervision. And lastly, these are the contacts for if we need help for somebody who is in crisis. So of course, there's the Kenya Mental Health Department. They have a support line. Then we have Center for Suicide Research and Intervention. So they have that number there and the website. We also have another organization called DFHRC, that's Diploma for Health and Resilience in Communities. It's an organization that works with young people in Majengo, Pumwani. Then of course we have Befrienders in Kenya, we have Village Media Africa, and we have the Red Cross with their contacts there, and we can all get support. Even as therapists, we need support. So thank you so much, Raymond and Wangari. Happy to answer any questions and listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can leave that slide, do not end. You can leave the slide of the contacts. I think it's very important so that people can have time to take that down, including your contact contact of your organization, which I had already saved in the chat. So if you don't mind, you can share screen the last slide again. The time is still on our side. We have a quarter of an hour to go, and I'd now like to take any comments and questions. I am looking in the chat to see if there are any I missed. At some point I got kicked out because of my internet, but I see Tom Nyangwara said, awesome presentation. Thank you, Tom. Does anybody have any comment or question? If you would like, please raise your virtual hand and you can now speak. Maybe as the audience is still processing the wonderful presentation, Mary, I'd like to find out if you have tools for assessing suicide for children and adolescents. I think there's been also an increase in that population. And are the tools that you shared for any age or only adults?
Thanks, Wangari. So we have a few tools, and I'm happy to share and attach on my slides when I'll be sending to you. Then probably you can distribute among the group members, and it is true. So I didn't mention that I have actually personally lost a client who was 7 years old. And you know, it's quite discouraging, and it's very traumatizing, to say the least, when you lose a 7-year-old to suicide and you have a 7-year-old in the house. So yeah, so I have those tools and happy to share with them, to share together with the slides after this.
So sorry about that. And my question on that actually is on professional indemnity. I mean, dealing with such a fragile population or set of clients, there are many times where you also are at risk as the provider. And so is it critical for providers who are intervening for suicide to have professional indemnity, and which other kinds of networking and connections can help us as providers to be well equipped? So that is my other question to you. And I can see in the chat there is a few more questions. Sister Jane, how can I help a client who has suicide? Vespa's changer. It has always been difficult to do ongoing session, as you said, especially in our government hospital. Yeah, that's a big one, because people walk in and mostly will come once and then disappear. We have the brief therapy model in a lot of our populations. So how do we work with somebody on an ongoing basis who will only prefer to come once, maybe because that's all they are able to do? I think you can take those three first.
Thank you, Wangari. So the first question of indemnity. So as a country, you know, we're just growing in the mental health field. So we're not doing so well. So we don't have like checks and balances here and there. However, I personally, like, I mean, like my supervisor is out of, you know, in one of those developed countries. And one of the things is not working in isolation. I have learned that when I'm working with a suicidal client, I don't work in isolation. One, I have to notify my supervisor here in the country, and I also have to notify my supervisor out of the country. And because you want to be sure that you're doing the right thing. However, what I have learned is to document every procedure that you take a client who is suicidal through, so that in case anybody comes to say that you never asked this, you never did this, you have proof. So one of the things that we have learned in my class is documentation. Document from the word go, and keep all the documents and all the records. In case of anything, you have proof. And that's why one of the other things I say after documentation, always ask the question about suicide. Always confront and ask this client, are you suicidal? For how long? When did the thoughts of suicide start? When did you attempt suicide last? In the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, have you attempted suicide? What methods did you use? So documentation is very key, and not working in isolation is very key. Until you get to that place of where checks and balances are happening here in the country, we are not yet there, but we will get there at one point. So we don't want to get caught off guard. So document, ask the right questions, document, ask the right question, and don't work alone. Those 3 things for me have worked so well. So even when I've gotten to a place where I am kind of like when I lost that child, I knew I had done the right thing, because I had kept all my records. I didn't work in isolation and all that. So those 3 things: document, ask the right questions, and don't work in isolation. The other question is about ongoing, especially in the government hospitals. Yeah, it's never easy. However, one of the things that we do as an organization is doing what we call contact care. So we do lots of follow-up messages and contact care. We do follow-up and say, hey, I was meant to have a session with you, you didn't come. What happened? Are you okay? So even when they said they're not okay, in that session, they were meant to come and they didn't come. You want to call them and find out, are they okay? And where are they at that particular time? So keep talking to them. Keep talking to them. Keep finding out where they are. And I know it's not easy when you have clients who... Hi, Sister Jane.
Sorry, Sister Jane, kindly mute. Thank you. Please proceed, Mary.
Yeah. So we want to find out how is the client doing. So even when they don't turn up, you as the therapist or you as the practitioner, do not give up talking to them. Make sure you talk to them. Find out how they're doing and how they're progressing on, and when next you can call them. So let them know that you are around them. You will keep following them and you'll keep finding out how they are. Yeah. I didn't get the third question, Joyce.
Okay. So I would say, in addition to following up, it's always good to have extra contacts.
Yeah.
So that if you can't reach somebody, especially now in a virtual space, then at least you have permission to reach their significant other. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So the other one was, I think you've answered that. How can I help a client who has suicide? Yeah, I think you've generally answered that. And a few more comments. Awareness says, I don't know if awareness is the name of a person. Great presentation. Awesome. Came in late though. I hope I'd get this presentation, please. So yes, if you are a member of Journal Club, we will avail this presentation to you. If you're not yet a member, please join us. Raymond will share the links in case you're a guest and you would like to join us. Susan says, thanks for this teaching. It helps us to know this important decision in what happens and is increasing so much in Kenya. Isaac Warambo says, that was very nice. There's a question from Cecilia Achieng. How do you deal with clients who are suicidal and at the same time, they decline to be initiated on any medication, besides being symptomatic because they believe in their spiritual strength? So there's a big debate now about medicine, psychotherapy, and spirituality. What's the place of medication adherence, and having clients to actually see that the severity of their condition at that point will require medication. So I think you can take that one from Cecilia Achieng. And then we have Sister Jane again. How can I help a client who has attempted suicide 2 times and has refused any assistance? The rest are just comments saying thank you from Susan, and thank you for the hotline number for suicidal thoughts. Idzai Muchabaywa says, thank you, Mary, well done and insightful presentation. Kathan Doreen, again, quite informative discussion and a great presentation. Thank you, our presenter and team. So I think you can take the question on by Cecilia Che on medication, and then the idea that people are resisting or refusing any assistance, the question from Sister Jane.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with Sister Jane.
And if you can, feel free to put on your video if you can.
Oh, no. Okay. Okay, yeah. Let me do that. Oh, here. Can you see me now? Yeah.
Yes, we can see you.
Thanks. So on the question about working with a client who's attempted suicide twice, so and they've refused assistance. So what you want to, when you're doing the first intake, so I'm assuming you've done the first intake. When you do the first intake, you want to ask them about their significant other or next of kin and all that. And you want them to know that they're in a crisis and they need help, and tell them that I am happy to even refer you, not necessarily to a therapist, but to somebody who is going to work with you. Because these people who are in pain or who are thinking about suicide. At some point, they do not want help. So they're kind of thinking it is done. So one of the things that I have learned is when you have working with somebody who is suicidal or who's attempted suicide, one, you want to validate their action. So you want to tell them, look, I know, thank you for sharing this with me. I know you had this option. And it's still an option. Let them know that it's still an option. However, allow me and you to come up with another possibility because it's possible. So you want to tell them this is still an option. However, allow me and you to come up with another possibility of what we can be able to do or where we can be able to or how we can be able to address this. Because one of the other thing is when they've attempted suicide, one, we said it's a form of communication. There's something that they're trying to kind of communicate. You want to find out what is the driver. So you want to move from a place of being a therapist to a place of being a friend, and ask them and find out about what are these drivers that trigger the suicide thoughts, finding out where they are at that particular time. So that even as you do that, then they become confident, wanting to talk to you more on where they are in their journey of this being in a suicide crisis. How long did this happen? How did you attempt suicide? So validate them. That doesn't mean that you agree with them, but let them know that this is still an option. However, could we explore another option? I'm happy to refer you to a friend to explore this with you. Keep sending to them caring, we call them caring contacts, SMSs, just kind of encouraging them and helping them and telling them that, you know, we still care. Anytime you need to speak to somebody, please feel free to contact me. So keep on following up with them, keep on talking with them, keep on encouraging them and letting them know that you know you can get help. You know, so yeah, so that's question. Then on the question about medication and what, so there's medication and spirituality and psychosocial support, I think so. Yeah, so on medication, I know so many clients who've attempted suicide or who are in a crisis, in a suicide crisis. One of the reasons that they don't come out is because they'll be medicated. That's something that I've learned. So we want, and that's why even at those points, we want to keep medication away. I know it's a debate. I am not discrediting medication. However, I have learned that these clients, the moment they know that there will be medication, they would rather not come to us to get help. So we want to tell them we can try and figure out another way apart from medication. Two, the other thing is about spirituality. It's never easy because most of them will tell you maybe it's God's will and you know and you know God has put me in this place. I want to keep praying and validate that. Tell them yes, it's okay to keep praying. However, there's also another help that we can be able to develop, both you and me as a practitioner or as a friend, to see how we can be able to move from this point to this other one. How can you be able to solve this problem? So when a suicidal client comes to us, we want to move from a place of talking so much about suicide. Once we identify that they're in a suicide crisis, but what are the drivers of suicide? What is causing them to get to this place of crisis, and address those things? If it's about coping skills, you know, it's about resilience. How do we talk to them about resilience? If it's about family, if it's about relationship, how do we address this relationship? How do we talk about this? So yeah, so we want to focus on the drivers the moment we identify that they're in a suicide crisis. Yeah. Thank you,
so
Joyce.
much. Yes, there's a question that was sent earlier on the chat by Marco Tomishik. And, you know, the question on assisted suicide. Now, I know there are different legislations in different countries, but are there any instances where we should not try to prevent somebody from doing so, assuming that we can do whatever we want to do with our own lives, you know, the idea of autonomy and agency, and that they have decided when it comes to such a time that, you know, they would like to take their life themselves. So that's quite a touchy question, I know, in our current legislation in Kenya. But, you know, the controversy really about if a person really wants to commit suicide, do you think we should necessarily need to try to prevent them, or would it be more helpful to help them in assisted suicide? That may be more appropriate. What do you think?
This is what I would say. I do not want to give an expert opinion on that, but this is what I would say. Even those people who are thinking about that, we want to find out what is pushing them to that. Is it a terminal illness that is actually pushing them to wanting to end it all? Then address that particular thing. So the thing with suicidal people, especially when they come through to us and they tell us that, we want to not stop talking to them. We want to find out, let's identify this particular thing that is actually pushing you to the extreme of wanting to end it all. The psychological pain is what we want to address. And unfortunately, I think this is, and as I'm saying, it's not an expert opinion on that particular topic, but rather observation. And my feel is that when somebody is thinking about suicide, if we intervene at the right time, they will not die of suicide. There is a will to die and there's a will to live. We want to encourage the will to live. It's always a battle between two in this person. There's a will to die and a will to live. The moment we intervene before they get to the act, they'll be more than happy to live. That's what I would say, Joyce.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I know that suicide is a very cross-disciplinary field, and Marco says, thank you. It's very kind that you addressed this issue, and I know it is not an easy one. There's a lot of ethics deliberations ongoing about that conversation, and thanks for bringing that up, Marco. We know in some cultures it's also allowed. So that is a very interesting dynamic. I know this webinar was attended by both specialists, non-specialists. There are still people joining the webinar. It was very well attended. You are awesome, Mary. Thank you so much even for the contacts. And for any of us here who would find it comforting to know that we do have contacts to reach out. So I'd already shared them in the chat, and please feel free to do that if you need intervention for yourself or your colleague or friend. So without any further ado, I'd just like to call the meeting to a close. I do not see any raised hands or any more comments. I think we've all been an amazing audience. Feel free to watch this recording once it is uploaded on YouTube. And I'd like to wish us all a very wonderful evening. So if there's no other comment or question, I'd just like to hand it over back to Mary, if you have any parting shots, and maybe tell us how we can reach you. I think I'd already shared in the chat anyway. So I think on that note, then after you close, then we can call it a day.
Thank you so much, Wangare. I am so glad to be here, and I'm so glad that we're actually talking about this topic. We all have something to do. On the 25th of September, as an organization, we've organized something we're calling Human Library. It will happen at Arboretum. So the way we go to the library to read a book? So this time we'll go to Arboretum in this library and read, because we want to unjudge everyone. We want to change the mindset, because stories change lives. And we want to get to a place where our mental health, or speaking about suicide and everything that is happening around us, can change a life of one person. So we welcome you. Call this number, the 0703-388-130. And then you'll get more information on how you can register to attend that. I am so glad for coming here. We all have something to do to prevent suicide, and it is possible. It's preventable. Thank you so much. I wish you all a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. I didn't know the Human Library is now in Kenya. I've been seeing it running the rounds online. I'm so glad you're doing that. I know some universities have graduation like USIU and others. So is it only physical or also virtual? Can people join online or only at Arboretum?
Now that people ask, okay, of course, the idea is to do it in person. But I have had so many people saying, hey, can we also have this virtually? So we'll try and see how we can live stream it, and then we will share the link once we get to that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Also, maybe a separate event. It might be separate because
Yes.
of the ethics of sharing, and at least with Zoom, you can have breakout rooms and people can talk about themselves. I think that would be such a healing session. Please give us more details once you have them.
I will. However, that person who is coming to be a book, they sign a consent. So we are very clear when it comes to confidentiality and them just allowing us to share their story. For them to just stand up and share their story, they'll sign a consent. So worry not about confidentiality. And if you don't want to be a book, please come and read.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Bye.
You can unmute your audio as you say goodbye.
Goodbye.